All right, Friday morning Krug Show. Chase Senior's in the house. We got a lot to get to. Let's go. Off and running on the Krug Show on a Friday, July 18th, 4 minutes to 11, 4 minutes to 2 back east. Hope everybody's having a great day. Welcome to the Krug Show. Brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out. They're in Emeryville. They're in Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. We're also brought to you by our good friends at Claw Daddy Arcades. They're a great follow on Instagram at Claw_Daddy_Arcades. To find a location near you, you see their logo on the top of the screen. Thanks to Claw Daddy Arcades for supporting the Krug Show. Two brand new locations opening this summer. Capitola Mall down in the South Bay, Visalia Mall down in the Central Valley. Check them out, Claw Daddy Arcades. We're also brought to you by Sharp Corners. We'll tell you more about Sharp Corners in a bit. But first, let's get right to it. And we should tell people, if you're watching live on YouTube, do us a favor, smash the like button, hit subscribe, hit that notification bell, make sure it's on. You never have to miss a show. And remember, when the live stream wraps, you can catch the full replay anywhere you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever your favorite platform is. Just search The Krug Show, and you'll find us. We got a lot to get to today, so let's jump right to it. Chase Senior's in the house, and I titled the stream today, Alfred Collins is the 49ers X Factor. Who's vital to this season? And Collins signed. The logjam of second-round picks has been broken, I guess, but still, Chase, 88% of his salary was for the 49ers were forced to guarantee Collins 88% of his salary. But credit the Niners, they got it done. He was in a walking boot before the draft. He is yet to hit the practice field in OTAs or the mandatory mini. What's your thoughts on Alfred Collins? To me, I have him down as the X factor on defense, because the Niners need two defensive tackles. They drafted this guy in the second round. If they really are going to be a playoff team and a bounce back team, I kind of think their second round defensive tackle kind of needs to be pretty good. What do you think?
No, I agree. And going into the 2025 NFL draft back in April, as constituted then, I thought the 49ers had a bottom 5 defensive line in all of football. If they were to have played a game then, it would have been Nick Bosa at defensive end, probably Jordan Elliott at one defensive tackle spot, Evan Anderson at another, who I really like, and then Yetur Gross-Matos or Sam Okuwanu at another defensive end position. And so the Niners clearly knew we need to upgrade that defensive line. That's exactly what they did in the draft. They drafted Alfred Collins, they drafted Mykel Williams, they drafted CJ West, and now looking ahead into 2025, they need these rookies to play big roles. And it might be too much of an ask to ask them to be starters. I think Mykel Williams should be a starter at edge opposite of Bosa. But for CJ West and Alfred Collins, maybe that's too much to ask that they also start, because Nick Martin and Upton Stout, they could start on the Niners defense too. So if all these rookies start, that's 5 of 11 players on the defensive side of the ball who could start for San Francisco under Robert Saleh during their rookie seasons. So we'll see what happens with that. And obviously training camp gets underway on Tuesday. These roster battles are going to be really interesting, but specifically with Alfred Collins, he's 6'5", 330, broad frame, good play recognition, really good at stopping the run. He has a monster wingspan, very athletic for how big he is. He already has NFL-ready size like Mykel Williams. He's going to be able to help the Niners' rushing defense, which has struggled mightily the last couple of years, like Mykel Williams. And like Mykel Williams as well, he's going to have to get better as a pass rusher. But he also lined up in a different stance at Texas, and the Niners' wide 9 scheme under Saleh and Chris Kocurek benefits pass rushers. And so I think that at the defensive tackle position, Alfred Collins has an opportunity to realistically start for this team. And if he doesn't, he's going to be a really important backup. He has good play recognition in the way that he can read and diagnose plays, but also he had 7 pass breakups last year, which is a really impressive number. And while the calf injury is a little bit of a concern and it's worrisome because he didn't do anything throughout the spring, part contract, part injury, and in the pre-draft process, he was sidelined because of that calf injury. The good news is, the positive spin is that while at Texas, he played in 64 of 65 games when he was in Austin. And last year, it really all started to come together for a Texas team that was one of the best teams in college football, made a nice little run in the college football playoff. And even in prior years, when he was playing alongside some really talented defensive linemen who got drafted, sometimes it was Alfred Collins who was carrying the weight of that defensive line, who was really turning heads along that defensive line. And it's so great that they got this contract done, because he needs to get on the field. He needs to get reps in. He needs to acclimate himself with NFL speed, physicality, with the play style that the Niners are going to have defensively. He needs to work on his pass rushing moves. He needs to work on this new set that the Niners are going to have him line up in. And anytime that you can get ahead of schedule, it's going to help the learning curve. And so to get this contract done, to get him in there for training camp, when practices start next week, this is a big development. And for him and his agent, lastly, it's also a win. You know, he got 88% of that contract guaranteed, being selected 43rd overall. That's a 10% jump from last year's 43rd overall pick.
Yeah, exactly. I was just reading that as you were saying that. Last year, the 43rd pick in the draft was the Cardinals corner Max Melton. He had 78% of his $8.8 million rookie contract guaranteed. Collins, as you just stated, gets 88% guaranteed. That's considerably more. And just, you know, just the way it is. I'm glad that the Niners didn't just bury their head in the sand and be like, oh, what can we do? Instead, they got creative, they got to work, and they got their player in on time. And that, to me, is what I care about. Let me ask you this. If you were, you know, so you mentioned the rookies reported on the 15th, the vets report on Tuesday, the 22nd, with the first workout slated for Wednesday, the 23rd. I will be there Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday at practice. And those are three of the most eagerly anticipated practices in a long, long time, because it's live and it's camp and here it is. And there's a lot of competition. Let me ask you this. You do an amazing job covering this team from afar, and you don't always get to come to training camp. But if you were there on Wednesday on the 23rd, you know, if you were there on the 23rd for the first practice, you know the way training camp practices are. You got the corners over here. You got the D-line over here. You got two gigantic football fields, and you can't necessarily be everywhere to watch every position group. If I put you at Niner camp on day one this year, where would you want to be? Who do you want to watch? Would it be the receivers? Would it be the D-line that's so young? Would it be the quarterbacks with Mac Jones and Brock Purdy with his new deal? There's a lot of running back new faces. There's a whole bunch of secondary new faces. Some really great competition between D. Winters and Nick Martin, probably at linebacker. Where, if you could watch one group work out, where do you want to park yourself at practice?
Yeah, it's a good question. And for those reasons that you mentioned, I think the 49ers are one of the more interesting and fascinating teams in the NFL going into 2025. Are they Steelers level interesting after picking up Aaron Rodgers, DK Metcalf, Jalen Ramsey, Jonnu Smith, paying a player like TJ Watt? No, Pittsburgh hasn't won a playoff game since 2016, but that team is fascinating. I think the most fascinating team in the NFL going into this year. The Niners have had a lot more recent success, and so they're not interesting in a way where you're like, I have no idea what to expect, like a Pittsburgh level. But there are so many unknowns and question marks on this team that if they went 6-11 again, I wouldn't be shocked. If they went 11-6, I wouldn't be shocked. They have really remade the defense, though. And so where I would want to be is on the defensive side of the ball, specifically watching the defensive linemen, because I think it's best case scenario if the three rookies start along the defensive line. They're definitely the most talented players at those respective positions, the two DT spots and at defensive end, but will they actually be ready to start? And so Mykel Williams got a little bit banged up during mandatory minicamp. I want to see how he's doing. I just want to see the long wingspan, the length, the athleticism, the power, the explosion, how he makes the transition to being a wide 9 defensive end, because it's different. I want to see if he can be a high-level player right from the jump, because I think best case scenario with his play style, with his ability, with what he did at Georgia, he could be a terrific complement to Nick Bosa. And Nick Bosa hasn't had a legitimate defensive lineman at DE opposite of him in years. I want to watch CJ West. You've complimented him with his strong hands and how that helps him at the line of scrimmage after the ball is snapped. I want to see how that play strength translates to the NFL level. Can he impact games right away? Because I'll tell you what, once he transferred to Indiana, higher level of football, he played better ball than the prior years against better competition. And so if you can get that short, shiftier, violent defensive tackle clicking early, he can help your team. And then Alfred Collins, he's going to be one of the biggest players in the NFL, 6'5", 330. There's one thing for sure. When the Niners walk off the bus this year as compared to last year, they're going to look like a much bigger, stronger physical team. Is that going to result into them being a better defense? We'll certainly see. But the defensive line is what I want to watch, because I also want to look at Bryce Huff. How do the Niners use him as a speed pass rusher opposite of Bosa? Was 2023, when he had 10 sacks and 67 pressures, a mirage, or is that a sign of things to come? Because if he can duplicate that success this year, that will help out this defensive line dramatically. I also like the energy and the intensity of Chris Kosaric, the return of Robert Saleh. So if I'm at training camp, I'm watching that defensive line. I'm also a believer that you win and lose games at the point of attack in the trenches. That position group is so important. Outside of Bosa last year, they couldn't generate a pass rush consistently. They couldn't stop a run. And a lot of the Niners' success this year will hinge on that defensive line.
No question about that. Let's get to JJ. We got this one from Bill Brown, 9407. He says, Larry was right yesterday. Don't pay Jennings a dime more. If he won't play on the current deal, trade him to the Titans for Burks. My whole thing is, look, if it's just about a few more bucks, that's one thing. But Spot Track was like, hey, he's due a 2-year, $38 million extension. I'm not giving Jauan Jennings $19 million a year. It's supply and demand. The supply is too great. There's too many good receivers out there. You could get Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper today if you wanted to. Gabe Davis today. I looked at the cut down of NFL receivers and the depth charts. There's going to be 10 to 12 decent receivers that are going to be probably going to shake free at the end of camp. There's no way I'm paying. If Jauan wants 2 years, $20 million, and I can tack on one more year to this year at like $13 million and be like, okay, now you've got the equivalent of the next 2 years. You're going to make basically $20 million over the next two. Squeeze out a few more guaranteed dollars. I'm all for it. But if he wants 2 years at $15 million or north thereof, of $15 million for 2 years, I'm trading him. I'm saying, Jauan, I love you, and I'm trading you, and I'm going to go take my chances in the marketplace with how else I could figure it out. I'm not going to extend Jauan Jennings at 50. It's not about do I have it. It's about he's a 4.7 receiver who's 28. He's likely to lose a step. To me, he already looks like his body's thickening a little bit. I don't want to get stuck for another big. How many big expenditures can you have at wide receiver? I mean, you're already paying Ayuk $30 million. To me, once you made that selection, it almost eliminated your chances of extending JJ for any significant amount of money. I like him. I believe in him. I think he's a good player, but there's no way I'm going $15 million a year. And it sounds like he wants between 15 and 20.
Yeah, my kind of stance on this has been he's been really valuable to the Niners. He was their top wide receiver last year, has a great rapport with Brock Purdy. He's come through in the clutch so many times. That's why he's called third and Jauan, and on the money downs, he's been money. I think that with his size and physicality, he's able to win. And so he's never been a fast wide receiver, but he's still been able to win in that regard. My thing with him, if he is okay with $11 to $15 million per year, I'm signing that deal yesterday. I'm offering him that, and I think that's great value for a really legitimate number 2, excellent number 3. If he wants more than $11 to $15 million, you have one good year of production. You had 975 yards last year for the number 2 most injured offense in the NFL. If you think that you're worth $20 million per year, go out there, do it again in 2025 like you did in 2024. And in this exploding wide receiver market, you can cash in next offseason. Inevitably, if that happens, the Niners probably wouldn't bring him back because they wouldn't be able to afford him. And so there's a couple of different avenues here. 11 to 15, that's my happy zone. If he wants more, fine. Play out the last year of his contract and prove to us, prove to everybody else that you're a $15 to $20 million per year guy.
Yeah, no question. No question. What do you make of the fact that, interestingly enough, and I don't know what this means, but the reports are that a number of teams have reached out to the 49ers expressing trade interest, and that the Niners have rebuffed any and all trade interest. That's interesting to me because I didn't know if there would be a robust trade market. As I said, you can still sign Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Gabe Davis, Nelson Aguilar. I mean, there's a number of veteran receivers out there, and the receivers seem somewhat plentiful. Are you surprised that, either side of that there are multiple teams that have reached out to the Niners, or that the Niners have kind of rebuffed them and said, nah, we're not trading him, we're keeping him?
I think that if you were to ask the common NFL fan about Jauan Jennings, a lot of them either wouldn't know who he is, if they're fans of other teams, or they wouldn't realize how good he is. But I think other teams understand how good of a player he is because this is the world that they live in and work in, and their job is to evaluate every single player on every single team and keep tabs on all of these guys. We're talking about a wide receiver who is physical. He's been a great player developmental story for San Francisco. He's one of the top run blocking wideouts in the game. He's been such a clutch player for San Francisco throughout his entire career. He's improved every year that he's been in the NFL, and he proved last year you don't need to be a Blazer for a 40-yard dash to be productive. He should have had over 1,000 yards if he didn't get kicked out of that final game. And so I think teams like his physicality, they like his swagger, they like his contested catchability, they love how he's a flatliner, they like his intensity, and a lot of teams value that. You think back to a player like Hines Ward of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He wasn't fast, yet he was physical, he was a run blocker, and he imposed his will on the opponent. And that's what Jauan Jennings does. And so you look at teams like the Las Vegas Raiders. Jacoby Myers is their number 1. You look at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson are battling to be their number 2 alongside DK Metcalf. The New York Jets have Garrett Wilson. Not a lot of other wide receivers on that team who moved the needle for me. Jennings was a high school legend in Tennessee, and they drafted Cam Ward, number 1 overall. They have Calvin Ridley, but they don't have a legitimate number 2. I think Jennings could make some sense there. And I think it's the intangibles that he brings and the fact that he's gotten better and he's improved that teams really like. Now, I don't think that they would give up a 3rd rounder for him, but I think a 4th or a 5th round pick, teams would be happy to part ways with that type of draft compensation and then give Jennings around $15 million, because the wide receiver market is as such right now where it's stupid. A team like the Dolphins, they're paying Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill $30 and $27 million per year. The Eagles are paying A.J. Brown $33 and Devontae Smith $25 million per year. If a team can get Jennings and they look at him as a number 2 at $15 million, and then they pay that other wide receiver $25 to $30, or they have a wide receiver on their rookie contract who isn't making all that much money, that's a pretty smart financial play for a player like that.
It's funny. Everybody's got their thoughts on this. We got this one from Southwest. He says, Larry is a hater. I'm not a hater. I just don't want
because you disagree with him doesn't mean he's a hater, man. It's okay to disagree.
And you know what? Bottom line is you can't pay every single guy on the team. It's a hard cap sport. So you have to kind of pick and choose who you can pay, who you can't pay. Now, my concern, I got to be honest, my biggest concern is that I don't, a lot of speedy receivers, they come into the NFL and then they learn what to do and then they lose some speed, but they learn what to do. And so it's like their success isn't totally predicated on speed. Well, Jennings came in, he never had speed. He learned what to do, but now he's losing a step of speed, and he's at that age where he's probably going to lose another step of speed. And if you ran in the 4.7s to begin with and you lose a step of speed, now you got like offensive tackle kind of speed. And I just don't want to extend a guy for $15 million a year who's got the speed of an offensive tackle, especially when in his year where he had his best production last year, the 49ers wide receiver core was dead last in the NFL as far as separation. So I think that's probably cause and effect, that JJ was your number one guy and he doesn't separate all that well. And by the way, you didn't separate all that well as a team. Okay, so I think Alfred Collins is a major X factor on defense for the 49ers. Give me an X factor or two on either side of the football or any of the three phases. Who are, in your mind, going into this training camp, this pivotal training camp that leads into 2025? Who are the X factor players in your mind?
Yeah, I look at these players as like important players. Is that fair? Like really important players for the Niners? Yeah. So, I think all of the rookies are going to be asked to play big roles, and the Niners defense is really counting and banking and leaning on some of these rookies to contribute at the very least. And this draft class is a crucial one for San Francisco, because even with this youth movement, I did the numbers a little bit earlier, the Niners have the fourth oldest roster in the NFL. And so last year's draft class, a lot of good signs. This year's draft class, I liked it. A lot of teams thought, and a lot of people who cover the league thought that the Niners overdrafted a lot of players, but the Niners really put an emphasis and a value on players who fit what they like to do. And so all of the rookies I look at as important players for the Niners in 2025 on defense. That's Alfred Collins, CJ West, Michael Williams, Nick Martin, and Upton Stout in the slot. And speaking of Upton Stout, I think he's an important one because the Niners don't have a lot of depth right now at the cornerback position. And so the rookies are crucial. I look at a player like D. Winters. You're pretty thin at linebacker. You have Fred Warner, best off-ball linebacker in the NFL. But can D. Winters take that leap? He had a coverage grade of 80 last year, which was 6th among all linebackers in the NFL. Obviously a smaller sample size, but there's something to work with there. And so I look at him in that category. On offense, I think Isaac Guerendo could end up being a big X factor. We're talking about a back here who is 220 pounds, who has 4.3 speed and physicality. And I thought that he showed a lot of flashes last year. Ricky Pearsall, can he stay healthy? If he can stay healthy, he's a pretty explosive player with the route running, the footwork, and the after the catch ability. Who's going to start at left guard? Like Ben Barch could end up being an X factor for San Francisco. And so those are the players who I look at as kind of X factors for the Niners this year.
I kind of think Guerendo might be an X factor, and maybe it's wishful thinking, but he just looks spectacular on the practice field. I mean, you're just talking about, it's like everybody's running at one speed, and then this guy runs faster.
Yeah.
And he's just so much bigger and faster than everybody else. And now he knows the system. And I gotta think that without Ayuk early, without Debo for the year, I think they got to throw the ball somehow. They got to come up with a new way to get Guerendo touches because, I mean, he's just a mismatch. I mean, when I watch this guy in the practice field, I think, wow, I mean, they got to find a way to get this guy. I would say I would try to scheme up at least a half dozen touches a game for Guerendo.
Yeah, and he has such unique ability at that size of 220 with the 4.3 speed. And at moments last year, you saw the breakaway speed with that kickoff return in the preseason against the Raiders, with that long run against the Seattle Seahawks. He also does not shy away from contact. Some of the touchdowns that he had last year, or some of the runs that he had inside the 20 in the red zone, short yardage, he will lower his shoulder and he will run with physicality. There are some concerns there with soft tissue injuries. He's had some hamstring issues pop up in the past, but if he can stay healthy, he's a really unique and dynamic player. And you just don't know what you're going to get from Christian McCaffrey. And I was reading the 49ers chapter in Warren Sharp's preview book. The difference between 2023 to 2024 in the Niners offense, efficiency, run game, pass game, red zone, third down, with McCaffrey and without, was drastic. I mean, he is completely help to elevate Kyle Shanahan's offense. As McCaffrey gets older, you need to find that back who you can transition to. And at the very least this year, you got to manage the workload for McCaffrey, and Guerendo gives you that different type of pace of back, physical and fast, whereas McCaffrey, he's physical and fast, but he's just a different player as compared to Guerendo. Guerendo can catch the ball out of the backfield. I'd like to see the Niners utilize him there. And the one thing I always kind of point to is that he was a raw player in college and going into the league last year. He started one game in his college career. It was his final game at Louisville in a bowl game. He caught this ridiculous contested catch wheel route, and you're like, wow. And last year at times, he would go the wrong way. He would go toward the wrong hole. He would make some mistakes with where he went with the ball, and sometimes it's difficult in Kyle Shanahan's outside zone scheme. But as he got more carries, you saw the game start to slow down. And as he progresses in his career, hopefully the game continues to slow down, because I really think the sky is the limit for that kid. I remember watching him at the NFL Combine when I was in Indy 2 years ago. I saw him run that 40, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that's a rare type of player right there with how he's built and the speed that he possesses.
He's so he's raw, and he doesn't know necessarily what he's doing, but I mean, his hands are ridiculous. His speed is unbelievable, and you're not going to have Ayuk or Debo for a lot of the year. So it's like, hey, to me, it seems like he would be a natural fit to to maybe carve out a more significant role. Is there a player, as we sit here on the 18th of July, and there are a number of players that still remain unsigned at different positions, if you could add in a player from the outside world to the 49ers that you think, viable, not TJ Watt, not Myles Garrett, not people under contract or people that have just no prayer of being here. But if you could add one piece to the puzzle that's maybe attainable, is there somebody or a position that you would look to add from the outside?
Well, if you trade away Jauan Jennings and you don't get a wide receiver, I think that immediately becomes a need. And so a player there, or players who would make sense. Amari Cooper, I think he's lost a step, but even 2 years ago, he was highly productive, and he's on a Hall of Fame track with how productive he's been. I think that he could at least help you. If you want to go with a bigger bodied wide receiver who doesn't have that much speed, like a Jauan Jennings, then a Keenan Allen could make some sense. Nelson Aguilar still has some pop to his game. He's never going to be more than a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, but he could help you. Another thing, too, at the wide receiver position, I like Jordan Watkins. I like Jacob Cowing, and I hope that he can progress. But what's going to happen with DeMarcus Robinson? We don't know if he's going to get suspended for that November DUI arrest last year. There's a possibility that happens, which further hurts your wide receiver depth. And so wide receiver, I think, would become a little bit of a need. If you think that you're in the market for a defensive end and you need pass rushing help, Jadeveon Clowney and Zadarius Smith are still out there. Might side with Zadarius Smith because he's been more productive for a longer period of time, and he has experience playing in the wide 9. So I think he could be a really good player. And then at safety, Julian Blackmon and Justin Simmons are still out there. And those are two really good players. For Blackmon, he's played under Gus Bradley, who's now an assistant under Robert Saleh. For Justin Simmons, a 4-time second-team All-Pro in the NFL, and he is an absolute ball hawk on that back end. We'll see what happens with Jason Pinnock and Richie Grant, but if they struggle early in training camp, the Niners could look to make a move at safety. Along the interior offensive line, Brandon Scherff is a longtime Pro Bowler who graded out well according to Pro Football Focus last year, former top 5 overall pick. If you have issues at left guard, and it's not Connor Colby or Ben Barch or Spencer Burford, even though the Niners plan to use him at one of the tackle spots, you could go Brandon Scherff, and I think that he would be a completely serviceable offensive lineman who would fit a win now mode right now for this team.
What is your biggest concern about this summer for the 49ers? And if you need a second to think about it, that's fine. I was go ahead if you have.
Let me add too. Got me thinking what's the biggest need? It might be corner, because let's say Diamador Lenore or Renardo Green got hurt, you're screwed. Who's playing outside corner? Trey Brown. He hasn't done anything in his NFL career, and so thinking back to free agents, as I just was combing through available free agents and the needs on this team, Asante Samuel Jr. is still out there. I know that he's been an iffy tackler from time to time, but former second-round pick, NFL bloodlines. His father was a great player, Asante Samuel Sr. for the Patriots and the Eagles. And Junior is a player who, in his first 3 years in the NFL, had double-digit pass breakups. He consistently makes plays on the ball. And so I think that answers two of your questions. Biggest need might be corner in a pass-happy league, especially if you don't generate a pass rush. And then speaking of free agents, Asante Samuel Jr. could be a terrific addition for this team. Now, only played 4 games last year because of a shoulder injury, and then had a neck surgery this offseason because he was dealing with these lingering stinger symptoms. He was supposed to have a checkup in July and then make a decision from there. Not sure about that checkup, but he did put out a social media video last weekend where he was doing some workouts on sand. It's always difficult to run and do conditioning drills on sand. He looked pretty good there. That's a player who I think could be a terrific addition for the Niners. As an outside corner, if Upton Stout isn't ready, then you put Diamador Lenore in the slot. Samuel Jr. has been an outside guy, and so you'd have Renardo Green on the other outside, and then Upton Stout, Trey Brown, Darrell Luter Jr., they become pretty good depth pieces for your team.
Yeah, no, to me, it's like, I think the 49ers can always use more pass rush. So the 3 guys that I'd have my eye peeled on would be Trey Hendrickson, Kayvon Thibodeau for the New York Giants, who may get traded, and Shamar Stewart, who has that August 5th deadline to either report, and he's gone back to College Station. Doesn't sound like he's given in. Doesn't sound like they're giving in. I would pepper Cincinnati with all kinds of calls offering second-round picks and more to try to get them to pivot, because I think if you could add Shamar Stewart, even though he's raw, he hasn't had an off season, I think him and Mikael Williams could be the new face of the 49er defense going forward. So those are the 3 guys I would want: Thibodeau, Hendrickson, or Shamar Stewart. I want those defensive linemen. But Bleacher Report did an article yesterday, or maybe it was the day before, and it was like what one move every single team in pro football needs to make, right? So I went and looked through it, and sure enough, the one thing that jumped out was how many teams are looking for a veteran corner.
Yeah.
The Dolphins, the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Commanders, the Vikings, the Raiders, the Rams, the Niners, all potentially could be looking for a veteran corner. So I'm with you on Asante Samuel. I know there's concerns about his neck and his concussions, and I'd sign him anyway. Yeah. I'd sign him anyway because when the corners run out, the corners run out. There's nowhere to get them. Yeah, I just named for you literally 8 teams that are all looking for a young corner. So I would definitely, if I could sign a player that's out there that's not an edge rusher, or acquire a player that's not an edge rusher, Asante Samuel absolutely would be that guy.
Von Gilmore's still out there too. That's another player who is a veteran, a former defensive player of the year. In recent years, he's played pretty well for teams like the Minnesota Vikings and the Dallas Cowboys. He would be able to help you. And with him and Samuel, at the very least, they improve your depth at a position where you do not have a lot of depth. Like, is Darrell Luter Jr. a good player? We have no idea. All he's been up to this point is a special teams guy with potential who's been injured a lot. Trey Brown, former 4th-round pick, but didn't see the field a lot with the Seattle Seahawks. Again, if a player went down and got hurt at that position, that's where things become pretty precarious if you're San Francisco.
So I asked you what's your biggest concern. My biggest concern is that the Niners, for the 3rd year in a row, are going to blow it at the cut down when it comes to the secondary. 2 years ago, they cut Deshaun Jameson to keep Isaiah Oliver, and that was a mistake. Last year, they kept Rock Ya-Sin and Isaac Yiadom. They cut Samuel Womack. That was a mistake. And this year, they've got some guaranteed money that they've guaranteed in free agency to some middling corners that were just out there. They guaranteed Trey Brown $500,000. They guaranteed Saron Neal $2.25 million. If they wind up cutting Darrell Luter because they don't want to cut veterans like Trey Brown and Saron Neal because they invested some of Jed's money, and Luter goes somewhere else and establishes himself as an NFL starting corner, the Niners are screwed up. I mean, you cannot cut 3 years in a row a good young corner to keep an older, lesser corner. And if they cut, I'm really fearful that they're going to cut Luter and keep Neal and keep Brown just to placate Jed and their free agent, and to justify their free agent expenditures. And that will be a colossal error, in my opinion, if they do.
Well, it never really makes sense to give up on young players for journeyman veterans. I don't really understand that thought process. And with Samuel Womack, I know that at times he may have lost his confidence, but there was ability there, both in college and at the NFL level, whether it be preseason or during the regular season. He was consistently making plays on the ball. He had pretty good instincts at that cornerback position, and the Colts couldn't have picked him up fast enough, and Indianapolis reaped the benefits of it. He played pretty solid football last year. And what I would like to see the Niners do during training camp and the preseason, see if Darrell Luter Jr. can play. Figure out if he can help you, and then go from there. If he is just a total stiff, then yeah, some of these other corners are important, especially in trying to upgrade your special teams. Saron Neal's been an excellent special teams player, but Luter is a guy who's big, physical, fast. He can run. Can a new coaching staff, led by Robert Saleh, Gus Bradley, maximize and bring the best out of a player like that? Because I would hate to see San Francisco, as you said, get rid of a player who's young and has ability. And also, as I think about it too, big concerns, you got to throw in Jake Moody, because Jake Moody last year was so bad. And I know the Niners have tried to cover it up and say, oh, it was because of the ankle injury. If that's the case, okay. But he also, when you looked in his eyes, he didn't have any confidence that he was going to be able to split the uprights. He drove Kyle Shanahan nuts, where I thought Shanahan was going to have an aneurysm at moments last year. And in a year where the Niners are looking to rebound off that 6-11 season, where they lost so many close games last year, and Jake Moody was partially to blame for those L's, the margin for error in the NFL is so thin, the Niners can't afford to mess around at kicker. If he's missing kicks, get rid of him and upgrade there. I don't care and give a damn if you used a third-round pick on him.
Yeah, I watched the Niner highlight reel. Did you see the NFL Network did like an highlight reel of every team? I taped the NFC West last night, and I was watching the Niner one, and I forgot that Jake Moody kicked 6 field goals week 1 against the Jets.
Yeah,
he had 6 field goals, which was kind of a bad indication of how the Niners
the whole year.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, they were going to struggle in the red zone. Give me an under the radar player that you are going to keep your eye on this summer.
It's a good question.
I got a couple. And I can go first if you want.
Yeah,
time.
You go first.
Well, okay. So I had Mason Pline on yesterday, and Pline is a big tight end, 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", in that range. He's got 37-inch vertical. He's really smart. They gave him the red shirt year. I think he easily outbeats. I think he plays Ross Dwelly, Braden Willis, Jake Tongas.
Tight end
to me,
3.
I think Pline is going to be tight end 3, but I also think there's a very good chance that you may see the Niners with no Ayuk go with a lot more 12 personnel with the 2 tight ends, and I think Pline is not just going to be tight end 3. I think he's going to become a receiving factor in the red zone. He's got good hands. He can jump. Purdy, he's been working with Purdy in the offseason. They both live in Nashville.
Cool.
He's been working out with George at George's home in Nashville all offseason. I think Mason Pline, he was a mechanical engineering major. He's plenty smart. He was a basketball player at Ferris State. He's an above-the-rim basketball player. I just think he's a weapon that I think is really, really talented that nobody knows much about, and I think they're going to see it this summer.
Yeah, I like Mason Pline as an under-the-radar player. Could we throw in Connor Colby as a sneaky player who could start at left guard?
Absolutely.
I mean, he started over 50 games at Iowa. They have scheme familiarity or scheme similarities to what Kyle Shanahan likes to do. Connor Colby is huge. He's like 6'5", well over 300 pounds. He has a nasty streak to his game. And if it's a close competition between Connor Colby and Ben Barch, maybe Matt Hennessy moves from center to left guard. Like, why not go with the young player? You saw how Dominic Pooney was able to help this team last year. Left guard is a huge question mark. And I think Connor Colby in the 7th round was exceptional value. I think that he can end up starting along this offensive line.
Oh, that's a good one. That is a really good one. I'll give you one more. Sebastian Valdez. I mean, there's just nothing not to like about this guy. He's just, I watch him in practice and I'm like, wow. And this guy was undrafted and he just looks, it's funny. It's like you can watch practice for the reps, but then equally important to the reps is the other player's reaction to the player. And if you watch practice really closely, you're watching Valdez have these amazing reps, and then when he gets back in line with his other guys are dapping him up left and right. Coaches are coming over, patting him on the back, because it's kind of like, who the hell's Sebastian Valdez? But he's absolutely putting on a clinic in OTAs. So he's fast, and he's got some pass rush ability. So he's another beneath the radar guy. Keep your eye on Sebastian Valdez. All right, before we get out of here, let's hit a couple of these battles that we're going to see, training camp battles. Who wins some of these battles? I'll throw you the battle. You tell me who wins. D. Winters against Nick Martin for that number 2 linebacker spot next to Fred Warner. Greenlaw is gone. Martin was the 75th pick. He only played a handful of games last year, 5 games at Oak State, but he had 47 tackles in those 5 games. And then you got Winters, who a lot of people feel looks like one of the best and most improved players of the offseason. Who gets that gig?
Well, who do we think is the third backer then?
I think the loser is the third backer.
Okay. So they're both going to start either way.
Technically, but I mean, let's be honest. The Niners are in the sub package 80% of the snaps. They're in the base 20. So the sub has become the base in theory.
Yeah. Let's go Nick Martin then. Yeah, I think both of them start in the traditional 4-3, but let's go Nick Martin ends up having the better preseason and training camp.
How about this one? Corner. They've got it Upton Stout versus Trey Brown versus Darrell Luter versus Saron Neal for the slot corner job.
Upton Stout. 4-4 sticky coverage, good against the run. His intensity, swagger, and confidence reminds me a lot of Diamador Lenore. I just think he's going to be a really, really good player. Maybe overdrafted a little bit, definitely small, but sometimes size doesn't matter, man.
Yeah. How about safety? Jair Brown versus Jason Pinnock versus George Odom.
Richie Grant.
Versus Richie Grant versus Marquise Siegel and Jalen Mahoney. And, what do you think? How do you see the competition at safety?
Well, I think week 1, it's going to be Jason Pinnock and Jair Brown.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's Jason Pinnock and Jair Brown at that safety spot because Malik Mustafa isn't going to be ready.
I like what I see, though, out of Richie Grant. I will say that. Richie Grant, to me, has looked really good on the practice field. But I think Pinnock is an awesome blitzer and became a really good blitzer a couple years ago playing in that giant scheme under Wink Martindale. Last year, Shane Bowen, the new first-year defensive coordinator for the G-Men, used him as more of a standard safety. And he was good. He wasn't as good. Now he gets back in a scheme. And I saw an interview that he did with Mayoko, and he was like, why'd you come here? And he's like, well, you could kind of tell. It's like this guy's been in 4 different schemes with 4 different coordinators over the last 4 years, and he wants some continuity. So he's going to a scheme. Since he's switching kind of full-time from corner to safety, he didn't want to switch schemes again as well. And it makes sense. So he wanted to go back to a scheme and a coordinator that he knew since he's kind of doing a position switch. So I think Pinnock might be one of the most underrated additions of the offseason. I think he's really good.
If you look at his TFL quarterback hit and sack numbers, like he's been a really, really productive player. He also has played cornerback and safety. And so if the Niners can kind of use him like they did with Talanoa Hufanga, where they're finding ways to hide him in coverage because Pinnock not great in coverage, nor is Hufanga, but they put him in a position where he can be around the ball, be around the line of scrimmage. I think with his length, with his physicality, with the size and speed, I think that he can be impactful.
Who are your 5? How's the receiver position going to shake out? So, Debo's moved on. Ayuk's out. DeMarcus will be suspended. Pearsall, Jennings, Watkins, and Cowing would be your top 4 guys. But now we don't know about Jennings.
Yeah.
What do you think? How's that wide receiver core going to look?
I think week 1, it's Pearsall 1, Jennings 2, Robinson, if he doesn't get suspended, 3, Cowing 4, Watkins 5. And then once IU comes back, they carry 6, which isn't out of the realm of possibility.
I think 6 is possible. I definitely see an outside receiver. I think Nair is targeted for the practice squad.
Yep.
Knowles, Owens, Gage, Cut. Bergen probably going to make it as a return man. I would say it's probably, if they go internally, it's Isaiah Hodgins and Bergen. But if it's externally, I think there's going to be some good selections. I think there'll be some good options around the NFL to choose from. One last super, and then we'll jet. We got this one from MSQ. He says, "What's worse, Cincinnati potentially losing Shamar Stewart, or Minnesota and the Ravens losing their picks in 2003 and 2011, respectively?" Thoughts? Why I didn't catch that. Why did Minnesota and Baltimore lose picks? I didn't.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Thanks for the super, but I don't recall what happened then.
I don't either.
But since you're potentially losing Stewart, I'll tell you that's a disaster. I mean,
well, and
he's back at Texas A&M this week.
And a lot of people are, tired of me talking about it, and I get it. And a lot of Niner fans just don't think he's very good. I personally think he's going to be really, really good, and I think he's absolutely made to play in the Niners scheme, and I think he's made to play for a guy like Kasarik. And I watched him at A&M, and he was really good. So I know he didn't get a lot of sack production, and that he has to have better hand usage. But what this kid's got, you cannot teach. He's so good against the run. The motor revs really, really hot. I would aggressively, if I were the 49ers, try to pursue this kid as August 5th approaches, because this is exactly the kind of piece the Niners could use. I mean, do they need more D-line help? Well, they may need a tackle. They may need an end, but they could definitely use more. It's definitely, and Stewart would be very, very exciting in a Niner uniform. Could you imagine if Stewart fulfilled his potential and Mikael Williams fulfilled his potential on this D-line? That might be enough right there to get the Niners over the top and get them that 6th ring. That might be enough.
I'll tell you this, you can never have enough depth along the defensive line. Look no further than the Philadelphia Eagles last year. They had depth out the wazoo along the defensive line.
And they had the best D-line going, and they absolutely harassed and harangued Mahomes.
Yeah.
And Dominic sent us his bottom of the pint today, Krug. We'll see about Lund. If he wants to go, we'll go. MSQ says Minnesota and Baltimore both ran out of time to draft. Oh, okay. So they didn't lose their picks. They went to the next pick. Yeah, both of those teams got, the time elapsed, but then they picked next.
Right. Yeah.
And some of those situations, teams, might do something like that to save a few bucks. Right. And we got this one from Petaluma Franchise. I think it's Franchise. He said, "I thought Shamar Stewart signed."
Shamar Turner did, not Shamar Stewart.
Yeah, Shamar Stewart is still out there, and he's a hell of a player. All right, that is going to do it for us. Chase, what do you got cooking on the rest of your Friday? You got some chat sports videos to make?
Yeah, so I put a show out right before we went live, looking at the latest around Jennings and a couple of teams who could be interested in him, kind of headlined by the Raiders and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then on the back half of the show, 5 Niners with the most pressure on them and the most approved going into 2025. So check that video out.
Nice. All right, that's going to do it for us. Thanks to Chase. Oh, we also should thank our sponsor, our last sponsor that we have not thanked, which is our good friends at Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. They're great. Check them out. They're in Monterey. They're at 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove, California, on the Monterey Peninsula. Thanks to Anthony Catania. He's at 831-521-5264. He's a great follow on Instagram at Sharp Corners 831 on the gram. Thanks to Claw Daddy Arcades. Great follow at Claw_Daddy_Arcades to find a location near you. And thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of the Krug Show. Thanks to Chase. We'll catch you guys all next week. Until then, peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of.